Today we will take a lecture about Chapter 6, talking about qualitative research. Qualitative research اللي بيسموها البحوث النوعية. This is different than quantitative research اللي هي البحوث الكمية. We want first to discuss what are the benefits and the limitation of qualitative research. Let's start with the benefits. One of the most important benefits of qualitative research is the type of data, because in qualitative research, the researcher allows the respondents to express themselves. So the type of data we get from the qualitative research is rich, detailed, and within the context. So it is ideographic rather nomothetic type of data. What is ideographic? Ideographic came from ideology or from the word idea. So that implies that this type of data come from the mind and the understanding and the feelings of the respondent. The nomothetic type of data which is يعني معناها يعني I have to choose among some alternatives اللي هي لا إرادية. I have to choose one, not expressing the ideas or not expressing the feelings of the respondent. Also, qualitative research give more insight than quantitative, and also the degree of understanding provided. We understand the feelings and the context and the explanation of the respondent. The validity of findings are high. The participants can express in their own words and many ways of expressing themselves because the researcher allow them to do so. We have many applications for the qualitative research, and the cost per project is considered relatively low. Every kind of research has some limitation, so as the qualitative research. Some of the limitation of the qualitative research that not every topic we can, not every problem we can discuss or study with the qualitative research. And among these types, those in which we need a statistically representative sample of population. If we need such a sample, so we cannot use the qualitative research. It's not applicable if we want a representative sample. Also, the reliability of the findings. We cannot generalize the findings of qualitative research because the sample is not representing the population. The qualitative research depends or rely mostly on the skill of the researcher because he is the one who argues and manage the discussion and the interview or the talk with the respondent. So the qualitative research depends on the researcher being skilled and able to manage the conversation. Yes, the cost per project might be low. However, the cost per interview or participant might be high for qualitative research. We have many qualitative techniques. Actually, we have two, namely the observation and the interviewing. How we choose if we will choose the observation technique or the interviewing technique in qualitative research, this actually depends on the nature and the objective of the research and the practicalities of time and cost. For example, interviewing doesn't need much time. However, observation needs more time than interviewing. Also, the nature and the objective of the research direct the researcher whether to use the observation technique or the interviewing technique. Many times we can use both techniques in a kind of research. So observation often accompanied by interviewing in the same research. Let's start with the first technique in qualitative research, which is observation. Observation is based on the ethnographic methods. Ethnographic methods, we will define this term in the next slide. However, you need to know that ethnographic methods is a kind of methods in a qualitative research where the researcher observe or study the respondents in their own environment. The observation allow the researcher to get or to gather data on what people do rather than what they say to do. They do, because the researcher in this case, he watches people doing their behavior. He's not asking them what do you do. He watches them while they are doing their behavior. Also, observation, it's not filtered by the respondent's memory or selection, because the researcher is not asking them about a particular memory. He is watching them doing it. We have two kinds of observation: simple observation, while the researcher is watching and recording people activity, and the other type is the participant observation. The researcher takes part in the activity that he or she is observing. Let me give you an example about simple observation and participant observation. For example, the researcher is conducting a research about workers in a factory. So simple observation, he goes to this factory, اللي هي the worker environment, and watch them about what they are doing. However, a participant observation, he joined them in what they're doing. يعني he works with them while watching them. However, the researcher need to be aware and take into account something called the observer effect. The observer effect means that people change their behavior when they are being observed. يعني الناس بتغير طريقتها في التعامل لما بتحس ان هي تحت الملاحظة، وده بيحصل كتير. ممكن الواحد لما ما يعرفش ان هو تحت الملاحظة بيتصرف بشكل، لما يعرف ان هو تحت الملاحظة بيتصرف بشكل تاني. That's the meaning of observer effect. Here is the definition of ethnography. Ethnography means it is a method by which the researcher study and learn about a person or a group of people in their environment, as I said in the previous slide. The ethnography techniques are observations, listening to what people say, or interviewing and asking questions. We have many strengths in using ethnography. Ethnography provides understanding of how and why people do things, and this is done in the context in which they do them. So according to this, or accordingly, ethnography gives insight to some phenomena which will not be answered using interviews alone. It also needs some observation and watching people in their own environment. Also, it allows seeing the big picture, which includes the social and cultural context of the human behavior. دراسة الناس أو دراسة الأفعال أو البيهيفير في البيئة اللي هم بيشتغلوا فيها أو عايشين فيها. Also, ethnography allowed to see behavior happens and justified from people involved and get context for understanding, as we said before. The extent to which researcher involved can vary, as we said before. He could be only observer, complete observer, and he could be complete participant, and he could be mixed participant observer. The simple observation, as we said before, involves watching and recording people and activity. It allows gathering data on what people do rather than what they say they are doing. So just watching people doing and not asking them any questions or interviewing them. We talked before about the observer effect. The observer effect could create bias because some of the respondents or the respondents generally they change their behavior if they feel observed. So what the observer should do in order to minimize this observer effect, he could do many things, especially in the start in the field work stage. He can give the participants an overview on the process and not getting into details. He can allow the participants to get used of the idea of being observed, although this might take much time and maybe the observer doesn't get the time to get them used. However, this is one of the methods to do it. And he can show the participants his notes to get them at ease. These methods are in the field work stage. To minimize the observer effect at the analysis stage, the researcher can ask the respondents about things they have observed. He does this to get their views about what has been captured and observing them in a variety of settings with different people, not only one watching, however, variety of settings with different people observing respondents. Now we move to the second type of techniques in qualitative research, which is qualitative interviews. Qualitative interviews are less standardized and more flexible than quantitative surveys and questionnaires. In the interviews, researchers use open-ended and non-directive approach. What is the meaning of open-ended and non-directive? Open-ended means loose question without specified answer, or non-directive means it doesn't direct the respondent towards certain answer or multiple choice answer, for example, as the way in surveys and questionnaires. Also, the interviews give the freedom to react to the respondents saying. So me as a researcher, I can change the way questions are asked and change the way of or the order of the questions and insert follow-ups to get more detail and clarification. Suppose I am interviewing one person and I ask some question to this interviewee and went to another interviewee and asked the same question in another way. Me as a researcher, I can do this in the interview, and maybe I remember a new question I can add to get more detail, or I can change the order of the question. All these things are very flexible in the interviews. Unlike, for example, the questionnaire or the survey, it's not applicable and it's not flexible as the way in the interviews. These interviews are described as guided conversation. Guided conversation means we have certain question, we have specified question to ask. It's like chit chat with interviews, however, this chit chat is guided. Also, it is less standardized and more flexible than quantitative, as we said, and it uses more open-ended, non-directive approach. Again, freedom to act to what respondent is saying, can do these three things we said before, and it could be one-to-one, pairs, and trios. We have many types of interviews. Let's start with the in-depth interviews. We have one-to-one in-depth interviews اللي هي المقابلات المتعمقة بيسموها, conducted by trained qualitative researcher, and it lasts from 45 to 2 hours, conducted in respondents' home, work, central station or center location like hotels. Also, variations includes paired depth, triad, many depth, and family interviews. These are depth or in-depth interviews. Also, we have in the same type the semi-structured interviews. It's halfway between in-depth interviews and the qualitative interviews. So and the quantitative. in-depth اللي هي المتعمقة اللي بنسيب الريسبوندنتس فيها يتكلم بطلاقة وبعمق. الكوانتيتيف اللي هي الأسئلة المحددة. So semi-structured is halfway between this and that. Interview give more structured than is usual. مش open ended خالص، لا ده semi structured شوية. Conducted by interviewers trained in probing and prompting but who are not necessarily qualitative researcher. يعني مش ضروري semi structured يبقى qualitative researcher. However researcher trained in probing and prompting حث الانترفيوي على الكلام والتحقق كمان من هذا الكلام through asking the same question in different ways. These type of semi-structured interviews are particularly used in the B2B research, اللي هي business to business research. We use in-depth interviews if the topic is sensitive or intimate, if more detailed info on individual attitudes and behavior, if the researcher need to get beyond socially acceptable view, if the researcher need timeline information, and if sample is difficult to find. These are the instances where the researcher need in-depth interviews. Also, we have these focus groups or group discussions. Focus group. What is focus group? This is group discussion with 8 to 10 participants, or sometimes we have this many groups from 4 to 6 participants. These focus groups or group discussions are managed and run by trained researchers. Sometimes he is called the moderator, and it is conducted in central location. So we invite these participants to a central location like facility, for example, or the home of the recruiter himself. Also, variations include mini groups, extended groups, or workshops, or reconvened groups. Reconvened groups for later because they are interviewed many times. Standard groups last from 1.5 to 2 hours, and they can be extended up to 4 hours. These groups conducted, like we said before, in central location or the home of recruiter. We can use focus group if the researcher need to see a range of attitudes and opinions, determine differences, understand social and cultural influences, or draw out ideas or creative thinking. And the use of focus group if the researchers do not need any minority views or any views not influenced by group. Let's now talk about sample size in qualitative research. Actually, the qualitative research, the sample in the qualitative research depends on many factors. Among these factors, the research objective, the complexity of the topic, the sample requirement, analysis requirement, and the practicalities of time and cost. With sample size and the use of the purposive rather than sampling methods, findings from the qualitative research cannot be representative from the statistical perspective. However, it is high validity. What is the meaning of this paragraph? This paragraph means qualitative research depends on purposive sampling method. معناها ايه purposive؟ يعني عينة انتقائية، انا اللي بختارها بنفسي بشكل متعمد، عينة متعمدة انا اللي بختارها بنفسي، ما هياش random sample rather than random. الراندوم دي بنشتغل بيها لما يكون عندي quantitative research او عينة ممثلة. That's why the findings بتاعت ال qualitative research cannot be representative، ما هياش عينة ممثلة للpopulation، عشان كده cannot be generalized. Okay. أما لو كان ال qualitative research full of disadvantage, why we use it? No, it's not full of disadvantage. مش عشان هي غير ممثلة يبقى معنى كده إن هي نوع وحش من الأبحاث. However, qualitative research sometimes it is used for certain types of topics or area where we need the respondents to express their feelings, express their opinions, not just yes or no or just filling a questionnaire. So, for certain purposes, we need the qualitative research. However, we cannot generalize the findings of this qualitative research over a whole population. This issue of representativeness and reliability in qualitative research. We talked about before that the sample is small in size and selected. Selected يعني purposive sample. Purposively that provide logic to the sample selected. So it is small and purposively selected. That's why the qualitative research cannot be representative to the whole population. However, the relationship between the sample selection and the wider population should be justified to ensure representativeness. Okay, now we move to the questioning style in qualitative research. The questioning style in qualitative research is open-ended and non-directive. We said that before. And has little or no direction on how to answer. So I say the question to the respondent and he answer with all at ease زي ما بيقولوا بكل أريحية. He relates to the topic in his own way and use his own language. طبعا we are talking here about the respondent. He can express in his own way and use his own language. We need probing and prompting in qualitative research. We urge the respondents for details, depth, and the clarification. We ask more. We encourage him to do more and encourage him to answer through nonverbal repeating, rephrasing, and summarizing. So we ask him to answer in several ways. Open-ended and non-directive, this is called psychodynamic model. Little or no direction in how to answer here. Respondent relate to the topic on his way and use his own language and not that pre-coded response. You know what pre-coded response were? Yes, in quantitative technique, in questionnaires and surveys. That's right. Other face-to-face methods. We mentioned the observation and the interviews. In the interviews, we mentioned the in-depth, semi-structured, and the focus groups. Now we have other face-to-face methods like panel or juries, and we have also workshops. Panels or juries consists of from 10 to 12 people. They meet regularly at regular interval. It can be up to 1 year and may be briefed in advance. They have different aspects of topic at each meeting. The workshops explore issue in details. They are usually from 12 to 15 people. They solve some problems or generate certain ideas. We have the online qualitative research. Rather than observation or making interviews face-to-face, we have these online qualitative research through a variety of methods like web-based group discussion, bulletin board groups, and email groups. Of course, for every qualitative methods, we have advantages and disadvantages. For online qualitative methods, we have some advantages such as much easier to gather widely spread geographical participants if the participants are spread in many geographical areas. So a very effective way is the online qualitative methods. Also, there is no researcher travel cost. Interaction is more easier to control and it is also recordable. Technology allows flexible in the execution of the research and it allows for the use of sophisticated materials such as stimulus. The anonymity of participants, which might be reflected on high degree of honesty and responses. Anonymity means that the responses may not be known for other people. So it reflects some honesty from the part of the researcher. Also, we have some disadvantages. Of the disadvantages we have through online qualitative methods, we have that the researcher and the respondents are not being face to face, so some communication could be lost. Also, the verification of respondents are difficult. Respondents can adopt personas. Interaction between participants is limited. Interactions with moderator is limited, cannot always probe for details as it is the case in face-to-face methods. Requires participants with computer literacy and email access, and also the moderator both should have computer literacy skills and they can use technology. Also, both should have compatible software. Administration and setup, respondent agreement, commitment, and availability. The time required longer than the traditional face-to-face groups, and the costs may be relatively high compared to the traditional methods. Okay, and by reaching this slide, we have come to the end of our lecture. Looking forward to see you in next lecture, inshallah. Thank you and